Now, this is where we ended yesterday. So guys, this is where we ended yesterday, ended the lesson, where we were talking about midpoint. Midpoint.
They're stealing my pencils. Do you want the other pencil, Jordan? They're stealing my.
You guys, give it back. Don't take his lead. All right, guys. So, midpoint. Guys. Because I can't remember if we finished this one. Okay, we'll move on to the next one then. Endpoints. Huh? Yes. Okay. No, here we go. Midpoint. So this here is the formula for midpoint. So M is just standing for midpoint. So x1 plus x2 divided by 2, comma y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So if I'm wanting to find the midpoint, this here is the formula. And all it's saying, to find the midpoint, the point that's between, in the exact middle of these two endpoints, we add the x values together and divide by 2. We add the y values together and divide by 2. And that gives us the x and y value at the midpoint. So for us here, we're saying that x1 plus x2 divided by 2 will give us the x value at the midpoint. y1 plus y2 divided by 2 will give us the y value at the midpoint. Now for us here, the x values of the midpoint, or x values of the endpoints, are going to be x1 and x2. So for us here, the endpoints of CD are negative 4, 3 and negative 6, 5. So the two x values that we have here are what? Negative 4 and? So negative 4. Yep. So negative 4 plus negative 6. And y1 and y2 are the y values of the endpoints, the two endpoints. And the two y values of each endpoint are? Yes, if we see that that's what it's going to be, then yes. Now we can simplify these here. Negative 4 plus negative 6 or negative 4 minus 6 is over 2. And negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. So for our midpoint, the x value is negative 5. Now we just need to find the y value. 3 plus 5 is, and 8 divided by 2 is, so the mid. You're good. Always ask. Any questions on this here? We good with this here? Yes? Now these next few here are a little bit different. Because if we look at this first one here, it tells us the midpoint of JK is M, 2, 1. So it's telling us the midpoint already. So it told us the midpoint is the point 2, 1. One of the endpoints, J, 1, 4. Find the other endpoint. So we're wanting to find the other endpoint. Now we know what the formula for midpoint is. The midpoint formula is x1 plus x2 divided by 2. So this right here would give us the x value of the midpoint, yes? Now y1 plus y2 divided by 2 will give us the y value of the midpoint. This is the midpoint formula, yes? Now, So x1 plus x2 divided by 2 is the value of the midpoint, yes? Did they tell us the x value of the midpoint? Yeah, the x value of the midpoint is what? 2. So when we plug in the two x values of the endpoints, what the x values of the two endpoints are, they should add together, divide by 2, and give us 2, because they already gave us the endpoint. Did they tell us what one of the endpoints was? Yeah, 1, 4. So one of the x values is what? 1. Do I know what the other one is? No, so we're going to call the other one x. So we're going to have to solve for the other one. And then we'll solve out, yes. Now we're going to do the same thing. We'll come back to it here in a second. I just want to set this other one up also. Because for y, it's going to be the same thing, because the y value of each endpoint added together divided by 2 will give us the y value of the midpoint. Well, what is the y value of the midpoint? So we add those two together and divide by 2, we should get 1. Did we know what one of the y values is? Do we know what the other one is? No. So we're going to have to solve these. Now, when we're solving for the other endpoint, the first step is always going to be the same once we get these set up. So if we do, or solve for x first, the very first step, every single time, is going to be multiplying both sides by 2. Because what we're wanting to do is, on the left side, that fraction, that division of 2, we want to simplify that. We want to get rid of it. We're trying to get y by itself. Now this is I'm going to write it out specifically so we can see why this works, and then we can kind of cross it out from here on. Because if I multiply this by 2, we're multiplying the 2 by the numerator. Because this 2 will multiply by the numerator. Now on the left-hand side, or right-hand side, 2 times 2 is 4. Okay. Questions on any of this so far? So far we just multiplied both sides by 2, yes? On this side here, we have 2 divided by 2, yes? Anything divided by itself is? Yes. So these here will cancel, leaving us with 1 plus x is equal to 4. That's why we're multiplying by 2. And when we're solving for the other endpoint, our first step every single time, once we get it set up, is to multiply both sides by 2. Because we're trying to get rid of that fraction. Yes? Yes. Yes. Minus 1? Yes. So for the other endpoint, and I think they're wanting it as k, the x value is 3. Questions on this here? Yes, sir. I think I know where you were going to go, but we could, if you wanted to work through trying to get from end to end, or the distance from one endpoint to the middle and then go the other way, that works. But again, it's a lot of just figuring out the calculations. Okay. Any questions on how we got 3? Okay. We ready for y? Because we need to solve for it. It's okay. Yes. And again, this is going to be the first main step whenever we're trying to find the other endpoint. Because when we multiply by this 2 and this 2 will cancel. That's why I wrote it out the first time all the way through. That's why they cancel, because we have that 2 over 2 that simplifies to 1. That's why we're doing this, which leaves us with 4 plus y. 1 times 2 is? Well, yeah, no, you're good. Because if we squared it, then yes. Luckily, we won't have to deal with that in here. We won't have to square both, well, unless we have radicals. But we're multiplying both sides by 2 so that, yes? Yeah. Okay, try this again. Yeah. So we could say y plus 4. 4 plus y, they're the same thing. Now, any questions? So we need to get y by itself, so we need to do what? Subtract 4 from both sides, which tells us y is equal to so the other endpoint is 3, negative 2. Questions on this here? Yeah. Yep. Example 3, problem B. Yeah, we didn't get to these yesterday. We just did the midpoint and talked about those. Any questions on this here? But really the big thing with this is we get it set up, we multiply both sides by 2, and then we add or subtract the number to get the variable by itself. That's it. That's all there is to these. There's going to be a few of each. A few of just finding the midpoint and a few of finding the other endpoint. Yeah, but we only have a few more slides left before we get there. So I want to do 1 or 2 more of these here with finding the midpoint or finding the other endpoint so that we kind of feel comfortable with it. And then we have one last thing, which is distance, the distance formula. And then we are done. Now again, it told us what the midpoint was. This here is our midpoint formula. So we add the 2 x values of the endpoints together, divide by 2. We add the 2 y values of the endpoint together and divide by 2. And for this problem here, it'll give us the midpoint of 2, 4. And it told us one of the endpoints is 1, 1. So for the x values, we know that the 2 x values of the endpoint added together and divided by 2 will give us the x value of the midpoint. And the x value of the midpoint in this case is 2. Now, did it tell us both of the endpoints? What's one of them? 1. And we can call the other one x. We'll do the same thing for y. Because the 2 y values of the endpoints added together divided by 2 will give us the y value of the midpoint, which for this case is, and one of the y values that we are given is 1, because they gave us one of the endpoints as 1, 1. Which one do we want to solve for first? X. So exactly, the first thing we would do is multiply both sides by 2. And again, the reason we're multiplying both sides by 2 is to simplify this fraction on the left-hand side. This here, the 2 over 2 will simplify to 1. They cancel each other out. They simplify each other out, leaving us with 1 plus x is equal to 4. 2 times 2 is 4. Now we just need to get x by itself, so we can minus 1. We need to move the 1 from one side to the other. Minus x is equal to 3. So I'm trying to remember it once endpoint u. So the x value is 3. Now we just need the y value. So with this one here, what do we need to do first?
And
Twos.
multiply both sides by 2.
Is it always going to be by twos?
Well, it's based off what this denominator is, the bottom of the fraction. Since for all these here, the bottom of the fraction is always going to be 2, so yes. 4 times 2 is 8. Question? Yeah. And then the next thing we would do is subtract 1, and 8 minus 1 is. So the other endpoint is the point 3, 7. Yeah. Questions on this here? How do we feel about finding the other endpoint? Do we feel comfortable with this here? Yes? Does anybody need to see another example of one of these? Do you feel comfortable with doing these? Okay. If y'all feel comfortable with these, we'll go on and move on. Because again, I put enough in here so if we need to see more, we have more to see. If not, we'll go on and move on if y'all feel comfortable with this. Because this here is the last thing we're talking about today, and it's the distance formula. If A is x1, y1, and B is x2, y2, there are points in a coordinate plane, then the distance between A and B is given by this here. Really, our big focus is this formula here, the distance formula. Distance is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And the order in which we put x and y, how they're ordered y2, y1, really doesn't matter. The main thing is that the x's go in the same parentheses, the y's go in the same parentheses. Okay. So, instead of giving us points, they gave us a word problem. Now, the origin, 0, 0, is going to be your house. So, where we're starting. Yes. Mm-hmm. So, your school is 4 miles east and 1 mile south. So, north, south, east, west. So, 4 miles east and 1 mile south. So, there's our point. So, we went over 4 and down 1. A recycling center where your class is going on a field trip is 2 miles east and 3 miles north. Estimate the distance between the recycling center and your school. So we're estimating the distance between these two here. Well, for the recycling center, we're at the point what? 2, 3. Now, we could count those if it was on a straight line. Because if it's going straight up and down or left and right, then we can just count. But unfortunately, on the diagonal, it's not that exact measure. So for this here, we need the distance formula. Now for this distance formula here, the main thing we need are the x and y values. Because the first one is x2 minus x1, okay? What's one of the x values for these 2 points? 2. Minus, the other one is almost 4. Because the x values are always going to go first. So we have 2 minus 4 squared. this. Minus negative 1 squared. Yes. Now, at this point here, so the square root, everything that we have on that, is it all numbers? Do we have a single variable in there? Can I plug that entire thing into the calculator? You can plug it in exactly as it is. You will get the distance. Because we don't have to do this by hand. The calculator can do this for us. Now, if we did do this by hand, exactly as y'all were saying, the negative and negative would make a plus. Well, 2 minus 4 is negative 2. 3 plus 1 is? Negative 2 squared. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Negative times a negative is a positive, and 2 times 2 is 4. 4 squared. 4 times 4 is? 4 plus 16. So the distance between these two is the square root of 20. If you plugged it into the calculator, you should get 2 square root of 5. Because it's simplifying in simplified radical form. I'll take either one. But again, if you type it into the calculator, it's just going to tell you 2 squared of 5. And that's it. Huh? Okay. Guys. Right. I mean, for some that's easier and for some it's harder. So, yeah. So, any questions on this here? Any questions on what we just did for this one here? Let's look at one more. From example 4, a park is 3 miles east, 3 miles east and 4 miles south. Find the distance between the park and your school. Well, our school was 4 miles east, 1 mile south. So we're trying to find the distance from here to, no, so we have 4, negative 1, and 3, negative 4. And again, to find the distance, we're just using the distance formula. So the main thing with this here, we just need the two x values and we're going to put them together in the same parenthesis. So, yeah. So your school is 4 miles east, 1 mile south. Yeah, it referenced back to that one. You're good. So, any other questions? So the two x values are what and what? So we'll have 4 minus 3 squared plus. So negative 1 minus negative 4 squared. Does the calculator care if it's negative 1 minus negative 4? No, it's still going to calculate it. Yes, we don't have to change it. So in a calculator, you can type it out just like this here. I can type it out exactly like this, and it will give me the answer. Now, if we did this by hand, the negative and negative here would make a plus. Now, 4 minus 3 is 1 squared. So -1 plus 4, 4 minus 1 is 3. Now 1 squared, 1 times 1 is 1. 3 squared, 3 times 3 is 1 plus 9. So the distance is the square root of 10. And that's as simplified as it gets. Yes. Any questions on this here? So guys, this right here is the homework. So go on and write this down. I will post it up in Google Classroom. I just haven't done that yet. But this is the assignment here.